"Don't make it weird," she whispered, without even looking at me. That's what she said right before we walked into her boss's party. I hadn't even opened my mouth. I wasn't holding her hand. I wasn't asking dumb questions. I was just standing beside her, breathing. Apparently, that was enough to be weird. So I nodded like a good boy, and I shut up. She walked 3 steps ahead of me through the double glass doors and never looked back. I remember thinking she looked beautiful in that green dress. I also remember realizing that she hadn't once asked if my time matched. Inside, it smelled like new carpet and champagne. Some marketing guy was already tipsy and talking too loud about margins. A violinist was playing something rich people pretend to recognize. Her coworkers clinked glasses. I clutched mine like a seatbelt in a crash. She disappeared into her people, her work friends, her favorite clients, her silver-haired boss with that stupid grin. I followed her with my eyes, but didn't move. Didn't want to make it weird, remember? She didn't introduce me to anyone. I stood by the bar for 19 minutes. I counted. At some point, I heard her laugh. Not the quiet one she gives me at home when I forget to turn off the stove. No, this was the one that makes her tilt her head back, the one I hadn't heard in months. It was for him, her boss, the one she says is like family. I turned to leave, but not dramatically, not in a storming out way, just slow, like the party was ending and I wasn't invited to the next part. I walked past 2 people gossiping about budget cuts, past a coat rack with a fur hanging on it that definitely wasn't hers, and stepped out into the parking lot without saying goodbye. It was cold. I liked that. It gave me something else to feel. I made it halfway to the car before my phone buzzed. "Claire, where did you go? Please come back." That was fast. 6 minutes, maybe. I stood in the dark, staring at those words. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because she hadn't even noticed I was with her. And now suddenly, she noticed I was gone. Why? I didn't text her back. I just stood there with the phone in my hand, watching her words glow on the screen. "Please come back." It wasn't anger or guilt or even curiosity that kept me frozen. It was something quieter, emptier, like the feeling you get when you realize the restaurant forgot your order and no one noticed you were still sitting there. I wasn't missed. I was merely absent. The parking lot was quiet except for the soft hum of a nearby street lamp that kept flickering like it had something to say, but was too scared to say it. I sat on the hood of my car, slowly peeling the label off a water bottle from the glove box, staring at the building like it was holding a secret it would never admit. Another message. "Claire, I'm looking for you. Are you outside?" Oh, so now I existed. And here's the part one hate admitting. Even anonymously, my heart jumped. I wanted to believe that she left the conversation mid-sentence and rushed out with panic in her eyes. That she realized she'd forgotten about the man who still knew how many pumps of caramel she liked in her coffee. I wanted to believe I mattered. A minute later, the side door cracked open. Just a sliver. Her head poked out. She didn't step into the cold. Didn't call my name. She just scanned the lot like someone looking for a lost earring. I knew she wouldn't find me. I had parked behind a tinted company van on purpose. She looked left, then right, then went back inside. I could have gone home right then. That should have been the ending. But I waited. 10 more minutes passed. Then the door opened again. This time, she did step out. Her phone was in her hand, face glowing blue. She dialed. I let it ring twice before I answered. "Where are you?" she asked, breath visible in the cold. "Watching," I said quietly. She froze. "Watching what?" "You." Silence. Then she spotted me, barely. Just a shadow on the edge of the lot. Her heels clicked against the pavement as she walked toward me, arms folded like she was cold, but I knew better. Claire didn't like how things looked when they weren't controlled. A husband disappearing in front of colleagues? Not a good look. I wasn't her partner tonight. I was a problem to be managed. "Why'd you leave?" she asked, frowning like I was the unreasonable one. "I didn't belong in there," I said. She scoffed. "You're being dramatic." There it was. That word. Dramatic. The oldest weapon in her arsenal. She always used it like a fly swatter, swiping away whatever I felt without actually hearing it. "I stood there for over an hour," I said. "You didn't even say my name." She shifted her weight. "I was networking. That's how these things work." "No," I said. "That's how you work." Her jaw tightened, but she didn't respond. Not immediately. She just stared at me, lips pressed thin, and for a second, I wondered if she was mentally calculating how much damage I'd done to her image tonight. That's when I realized something that hit me harder than anything she said. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't begging me to come back because she missed me. She was begging because she didn't want to explain why I was gone. And that cut deeper than any betrayal I'd ever imagined. The drive home was dead silent, except for the faint sound of her notifications going off in her purse. She didn't check them. She just stared out the passenger window like the night had nothing to do with her, as if I was the only one bleeding inside. I didn't turn the radio on. I didn't ask her what she meant by, "You're being dramatic." I didn't ask why it took 2 texts for her to even notice I'd vanished. I didn't ask if her boss always touched her shoulder when he laughed, or if she always leaned in so close when she spoke to him, or if it was just tonight. I didn't ask anything, but my mind, it wouldn't shut up. When we got home, she went straight to the bedroom and peeled off her dress like it was just another exhausting costume. I sat in the kitchen with the fridge door open longer than necessary, just staring at the dull light inside like I expected answers to be hiding behind the condiments. That's when I saw it. Her work phone. She always kept it in her handbag, but tonight it was lying on the counter, face down, as if she was too distracted to follow her usual rituals. Claire had rules. She never mixed her work phone with home life. She claimed it was for mental separation, but part of me always wondered if it was just separation, full stop. I didn't touch it. Not then. Instead, I lay awake, listening to her breathing slow beside me as she drifted off like someone who hadn't made their husband feel invisible hours earlier. I thought sleep would help me feel something less pathetic. It didn't. The next morning, she was already gone when I opened my eyes. The only evidence she'd come home at all was the faint indentation on her pillow and the empty space in the closet where that green dress had hung. She must have taken it to the dry cleaner. She always did that when she didn't want to explain where she'd been. I sat in the kitchen, sipping cold coffee and trying not to check the work phone still sitting there on the counter. She'd clearly forgotten it. Claire never forgot anything unless her brain was somewhere else. And right now, I was starting to realize that somewhere else might have a name, a face, and a tailored suit. The phone buzzed once. Then again. No names. Just numbers. One local. One from out of state. My fingers hovered. I didn't open anything. I just stared at the notifications, trying to convince myself that I wasn't becoming the kind of man who snoops. But something about that second number, it made my stomach knot. I recognized the area code. It was the same one her boss bragged about having family in. That wasn't proof, obviously, but it wasn't nothing either. The real crack came later that day, when I went to pick up lunch near her office. It wasn't intentional. I swear. There's a deli 2 blocks down that I used to go to before I started working from home. I thought maybe something familiar would clear my head. As I waited for my sandwich, I looked up. There she was, outside her building, standing on the steps, laughing. With him. Not her boss. Not this time. Another man. Younger. Stylish. Hand in his pocket, leaning toward her like they were sharing a secret. She reached up and brushed something off his collar. He didn't flinch. He didn't seem surprised. And she didn't look guilty. She looked comfortable. I stood there, holding a paper bag full of sandwiches no one was going to eat, watching my wife smooth down a man's tie like it was the most natural thing in the world. And I finally understood. This wasn't about last night, or her boss, or one party. This was bigger. Something was unraveling. Quietly, carefully, and I was the only one who hadn't heard the thread snap. I didn't confront her that night. I didn't say I saw her. I didn't mention the man, the tie, or how familiar her fingers looked smoothing it down. Claire came home late, said traffic was terrible. I nodded, kissed her cheek, and asked if she wanted leftovers. She said no. She already ate. The rest of the night passed like we were playing a game called Pretend We're Fine. I asked about her meetings. She gave short answers. I told her my client canceled a call. She barely responded. We sat through an episode of some reality show she used to love, both of us staring at the screen but seeing nothing. Around midnight, while she was in the shower, I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened her laptop. I didn't have to guess the password. She used the same one for everything. The name of our old cat, followed by her graduation year. I didn't even feel guilty. Not because I wanted to be that guy, the paranoid husband digging for proof, but because I already knew something was wrong. I wasn't looking for a maybe. I was looking for the scale of it. At first, it was clean. Too clean. No personal tabs. No bookmarks that weren't work-related. But I found it eventually. A hidden folder inside her downloads labeled Q3 Reports. Cute. She knew I'd never open that. Inside were screenshots. Dozens. Most of them were of Instagram messages. Conversations between her and people I'd never heard of. Some harmless. A few flirty. One made my heart stop. It was a photo of Claire, not scandalous, but personal. She was wearing one of my hoodies, curled up on the couch, clearly at home. The caption read, "Miss you today? Your spot feels empty." It wasn't sent to me. The reply came 2 minutes later. "Soon. I promise." I stared at that thread until the screen dimmed. Then I opened another file. And another. There was one labeled Archive. Inside, texts copied and pasted into a Word doc. 2 years worth. 2 years. Conversations she had while we were still okay. While I was still waking up early to bring her coffee in bed. While I was still the man in her phone under my favorite person. Now I wasn't even in the top 5. I closed the laptop before she stepped out of the bathroom. She walked past me in her robe, towel wrapped around her hair like a crown, humming some soft, empty melody under her breath. She didn't notice anything. She never did. Or maybe she did and just didn't care. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It wasn't the messages or the smile she reserved for someone else. It was the sudden clarity that hit me in that moment. A single, horrible truth I couldn't unsee. She had built an entire life that didn't include me. And she did it right under my nose. Not with malice. Not with rage. But with something colder. Indifference. I didn't sleep that night. Not even a little. I lay next to her and watched the red numbers on the clock crawl toward morning like they were dragging a body. Claire snored softly beside me, totally unbothered, her mouth slightly open, her legs stretched over my side like it still belonged there. Like nothing had changed. But everything had. I didn't wake her. I just got up early and stood in the kitchen in the dark. No lights. Just the fridge humming behind me and the occasional creak of the pipes warming up. I didn't want coffee. I didn't want food. I just wanted to be still. To think. The strange thing about betrayal is that it doesn't feel sharp at first. You expect it to slice right through you, but it doesn't. It seeps in like cold water, slow, creeping, heavy. And then one day, you wake up and you're drowning in something you never saw coming. By 7 a.m., I had already made a plan. Not revenge. Not a confrontation. Something quieter. I would collect silence. That would be my protest. That would be my weapon. I wouldn't yell. I wouldn't demand. I wouldn't fall to pieces in front of her again. I would vanish in place, right in front of her, like a ghost still opening cupboards and folding laundry. She came into the kitchen in her usual rush, wearing heels and a fresh coat of lipstick. Her phone was in her hand before she even said good morning. I watched her scroll through something, smiling a little at whatever she read. "Did you sleep okay?" she asked, not looking up. "Yeah," I lied. Like a rock. She nodded and walked past me. No kiss. No pause. Just the sound of her heels clicking down the hallway and the door closing behind her. That was the last normal morning we had. Over the next week, I played my role. Perfectly. I made dinner. I asked how her day was. I watched movies with her on the couch. I even laughed at her stories, even though I'd read the exact same things in her texts to someone else the night before. But behind the scenes, I started pulling back, quietly, strategically. I made copies of our shared documents. Bank accounts, deeds, insurance papers. She never noticed. She was too busy texting someone who wasn't me. I started journaling again, too, something I hadn't done since college. Not because I needed to document the betrayal, but because I needed to remind myself I still existed. That I still had thoughts and feelings that weren't just reactions to her absence. I wrote everything down. The way she hummed when she typed. The way she smiled when her phone lit up. The way she didn't notice when I stopped kissing her goodnight. I also started saving screenshots. Not to hurt her. Not to expose her. Just in case she ever made me feel crazy. Just in case she ever said, "You're imagining it." I wasn't. I saw the way she changed her passcode. I saw how she started showering at odd times. Right before dinner. Right after running errands. I saw how she never left her phone charging in the kitchen anymore. She thought she was subtle. But I was watching everything. And here's the strangest part. The more I learned, the calmer I felt. Like I'd been chasing something in the dark for so long that finally seeing it, finally knowing it had teeth, gave me peace. I wasn't losing my mind. I was losing my wife. And somehow, those two things weren't the same anymore. It's funny how fast someone can become a stranger once you stop filling in the blanks for them. I used to write entire stories in my head to excuse Claire's behavior. If she didn't text back, I assumed she was in a meeting. If she stayed late, I figured she was helping someone with a deadline. If she wore perfume to just grab coffee with a friend, I told myself it was force of habit. I built a castle of benefit of the doubt so tall, I couldn't even see the truth anymore. But once the blinders came off, everything became obvious. Painfully obvious. Like how she started calling me babe again, but only when she needed something. Or how she asked about my day in a sweet, chirpy voice that always showed up right after a suspicious phone call. It wasn't affection. It was camouflage. So I stopped helping her lie to me. I stopped smiling when her excuses didn't make sense. I stopped pretending I didn't smell cologne on her jacket when she walked in late, cologne I didn't own. I didn't accuse her. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. I just let her say what she wanted, then nodded like a man who was too tired to build another bridge to nowhere. I think that's what rattled her most. She was used to my overreactions, my sad eyes, my long-winded questions about where we went wrong. She wasn't prepared for indifference. She wasn't ready for the silence that stretched between us like a canyon. She started trying harder. That was new. She bought groceries I liked, even though she always complained they were too processed. She wore the sweater I'd gotten her for our last anniversary, the one she once called a little too safe. She even made my favorite pasta one night, with extra garlic and toasted breadcrumbs on top, just the way I used to make it before she stopped eating carbs. She was trying to rebuild something, but it wasn't for me. It was for the version of me she needed me to be, the quiet husband, the one who didn't check phone logs or watch the way she flinched when I reached for her phone by mistake. So I gave her what she wanted. I let her believe the performance was working. I let her sit next to me on the couch, legs draped over mine, while I watched her eyes dart to her screen every time it buzzed. I let her fall asleep beside me while her phone lit up the room like a lighthouse warning me of things I already knew. And while she slept, I started moving pieces behind the curtain. I met with a lawyer. He was quiet, older, the kind of man who asked more questions than he answered. I didn't tell him everything, just enough. Enough for him to raise an eyebrow and say, "I've seen this story before." He helped me set up a private account, helped me understand how joint property really works, helped me build a paper trail. Not because I wanted to destroy her, but because I didn't want to drown if she pulled the rug out first. I didn't plan to leave. Not yet. But I wanted to be ready if she did. I also installed a security camera in the living room. It wasn't hidden. It was a cheap one, visible, obvious, intentionally awkward. I wanted her to see it and feel uncomfortable. I wanted her to wonder what I knew, what I was watching, how much I'd already figured out. The first time she noticed it, she laughed. "Really? A camera? What are you expecting to catch? Me stealing snacks?" I smiled. Something like that. She didn't ask again. But that night, she turned off the Wi-Fi before bed. "Router's been weird lately," she said with a shrug. I just nodded. She didn't realize the camera had a backup SD card. And I didn't tell her. Because the truth is, I already knew what I needed to know. Now, I just needed her to confirm it, in her own words, in her own movements. And eventually, she would. They always do. There are moments you can't unlive, even if you try. They settle in your spine. They change how you carry yourself, how you look at breakfast, how you answer the question, "Are you okay?" without blinking too long. Mine came on a Tuesday. Just an ordinary, beige Tuesday. Claire had a Zoom call. That's what she told me. She needed the whole house quiet. Said it was a sensitive internal review. I almost laughed. Sensitive. That was a word I hadn't heard her use to describe me in over a year. But for work? For this call? Suddenly, she was all about boundaries and silence and professionalism. So I went for a walk. I didn't want to. I had things to do, emails to reply to. But I went because I wanted her to feel comfortable. I wanted her to let her guard down. I wanted her to forget I was ever a threat. I walked 2 blocks down, turned left, got a coffee I didn't want, sat on a park bench and stared at a duck pond full of cigarette butts and plastic lids. It was cold, windy. The kind of weather that made you wonder why you ever left the house in the first place. After about 20 minutes, I turned around. I don't know why. Call it instinct. Call it stupidity. But something in my chest felt unfinished. When I came back, I didn't go in through the front. I walked around to the back of the house and stepped softly onto the porch. The window was cracked open, just an inch. Probably to let the steam out. Claire always hated how stuffy the living room got when the sun hit the glass just right. That's when I heard it. Her voice. Not formal. Not corporate. Not the professional Claire she used for meetings and quarterly updates. Soft, warm, personal. I couldn't hear the other voice clearly. Just low murmurs and occasional laughter. But I heard her perfectly. Every inflection, every giggle, every word wrapped in the kind of comfort you don't use with a stranger. You always know what to say. I've missed your voice. I still think about that weekend. That last one gutted me. She said it in a tone I hadn't heard in years, like a secret being revisited, like a memory she still carried in her pocket. I stepped back from the window, careful not to breathe. I wanted to believe I misunderstood. I wanted to believe it was a role play, a joke, something innocent twisted by my paranoia. But even as I reached for rational explanations, I knew. This wasn't the first call. This was just the first one I caught. When she ended the call, I slipped back around the front and timed my entrance so it sounded like the door creaked open naturally. I stomped my feet, faked a sigh, muttered something about the cold. She was in the kitchen, pouring herself tea. No nerves. No guilt. No red cheeks. She smiled. Hey, how was your walk? I stared at her. Quiet, I said. She kissed me on the cheek. I flinched, not enough for her to notice, but enough for me too. She asked if I wanted tea. I said no. I went upstairs, locked the door to the guest room, and sat on the edge of the bed for what felt like hours. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, listening to the sound of the kettle downstairs and realizing that the person who once memorized my fears and wiped away my panic attacks was now whispering about weekends with someone else while I fed ducks and drank cold coffee. Later that night, she fell asleep beside me, and I finally listened to the audio file from the living room camera. Yes, I had started recording days earlier. Just short clips. Just in case. What I heard wasn't explosive. It was worse. It was comfortable. That kind of comfort only comes from repetition. From history. From practice. She had no idea I knew. Not that night. Not the next day. Not the week after. She smiled. She kissed me goodbye. She called me pet names while texting someone else under the table. And I smiled back, packed her lunch, asked how her deadlines were going, told her the new shampoo smelled good on her. I said all the right things. But I wasn't there anymore. I had already left her in my mind. And in a strange, quiet way that made me feel more in control than I had in years. I started rebuilding myself in silence. Little things at first. I went to the movies alone, got popcorn, picked a seat in the back, turned off my phone, and just existed in a dark room without being compared, corrected, or ignored. I took a day off work and walked through an art museum without telling her. I stood in front of a single painting for 20 minutes and didn't have to explain why. I started sleeping in the guest room more often. At first, I blamed it on snoring, then on needing space. She didn't fight it. I think part of her was relieved. Less guilt, less pressure to perform affection she no longer felt. And eventually, the silence between us wasn't awkward anymore. It was routine. Then, one Sunday afternoon, it happened. She forgot her phone on the kitchen table. That never happened. It buzzed 3 times. Same name each time. I didn't touch it. I just sat there, watching it light up, over and over. Until finally, I got up, grabbed a pen, and wrote a single line on the back of a receipt. He deserves all of you. I'm setting you free. I folded it, tucked it under the phone, and left the house. No shouting. No suitcase throwing. No tears on the porch. Just a key on the counter, a note on the table, and the weight off my shoulders. I didn't block her. I didn't stalk her pages. I didn't wait for her apology. I moved out. Quietly. Carefully. Into a small place on the edge of the city with more light than furniture. And for the first time in years, I could hear myself think. My chest didn't feel heavy when I walked through the door. My name on the lease was the only name that mattered. And my reflection in the mirror looked calm. It's strange, I always thought I needed closure. A big confrontation. Some dramatic final scene where she'd beg, or I'd scream, or something would shatter. But I didn't. I just needed to choose myself. The other day, I made a cup of coffee exactly the way I like it. Too sweet, slightly burnt. I sat on the balcony, legs up on the railing, watching the clouds drift over the city like slow, lazy thoughts. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I felt something I hadn't tasted in years. Peace. Not happiness. Not revenge. Just peace. And maybe that's the real ending here. Maybe not all betrayals need fire and fury. Maybe sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do, when someone treats you like you're invisible, is to stop standing in front of them and walk back into the light.